Welcome to Imperfect Garden and to my first military chat video. In this video, since it's my first video, we will take a look at the first tank in Sweden. We actually had two tanks we can talk about when we talk about the first tank in Sweden. We have the tank that was actually the first one who set foot here, and that was of course the Renault FT. The second tank we can talk about that is the first tank in Sweden is the first official tank, a tank that gets a army designation. And that was a German tank, the M21. We will talk about that tank in a different video. So let's focusing on the first tank that actually came to Sweden. The Renault FT, that is a First World War tank. It's a French tank, and it came very at the end of World War One, like in 1918. You could also say it's the first modern tank because the previous tanks in World War One, like you had the British Mark 1 to 5, I mean, they were huge tanks, like landship tanks, how you have spontoons on the side with machine guns or with cannons, like big lumber things. You have the French, the Snyder, also a huge monster. And the biggest one of them all was, of course, the German, the A7. The A7, that was like a rolling house with like, I don't know, 200 people inside and like 1 million machine guns sticking out everywhere. Really monstrous landships. But the French, actually, after the Schneider, they start thinking, what would be a practical tank? And they come up with the Renault F1. It's small, they have a minimum like 2 crew members and 1 rotating turret, 360 degrees. And that is the first tank that looked like that. And as you see, it's still the basis of all tanks in the world. Well, except some assault guns, and you have the Swedish S-tank, we have no turret. But the basis is make a small tank, or as small as possible, we should say, with good enough defense and a gun, one gun, that can shoot in every direction. Sweden, as all other countries during World War One, were watching very intensely at that war and see what are they doing, especially at the Battle of Somme, when we have the first British tanks going into the war, in the battle. It's not a huge success during the war, but it's the first step. After World War One, Sweden was like, maybe we should have a tank too. I mean, everyone else seems to be interested in these metal things that rumbling around. So in January 1921, we make a decision in Sweden. We will need to look for tanks, but not only tanks. We look for different other modern weaponry. But one of the things is like something tank-like, and we start sending out teams into Europe and start, asking around. We have one team that go to Germany, even though Germany can't really sell tanks after World War One because of the Versailles Treaty. But never mind that. Another team goes to talk with France, and there is no F1. And they go there, hey, can we look at one of your tanks and maybe buy one of them? And the French, of course, don't need all the tanks. And like, yeah, you can buy one of our tanks. The decisions comes very fast now. But the interesting thing with the Renault F1 in Sweden, we can't really see it in Sweden's, the military source materials until 1923. We have a little bit problems with, in the source materials, what is actually the first tank in Sweden. Because on one hand, some say that the German tank, the M21, that becomes the M21, was the first tank in Sweden. Because we look at the dates in the documents, and we have like 1921, we have 1922, it's like assembled in Sweden, and in 1923 we have like the first military maneuvers. And in 1923 we also have, in the military documents we also see the Renault F1. But the problem is that means that the F1 is later than the German tank. That's very strange, because we can also find materials that dates to 1921, early 1921. that says that the Renault F1 was the first one. One of the best proofs that the Renault was the first tank in Sweden is actually from one of the Swedish newspapers, Aftonbladet, because they have an article that says, look here, a veteran tank from World War I is coming to Sweden. And we have the date, the 19th of July in 1921. And by then, we have not even started talking about the German tank yet. And we also have in the newspapers another article here too about the first maneuver. And this is also like 1 year before we have assembled the German tank in Sweden. So the proof is, even though the military documents is a little bit sparse, we have documents, historic documents from newspapers and eyewitnesses that have seen the tank in action. We had maneuvers with it before we had the official German tank in Sweden. From the decision in January 1921, we need a tank. We go to the French and then say, yes, you can buy a tank. In May already 1921, we go for an inspection of one Renault F1. We even have the serial number 66549, as you can see in these pictures. And this is the first tank that we buy and they come to Sweden. We have a lot of rumors about this first tank because the information is a little bit, we don't have so much information about it in the early years. And this tank also have a very short life in Sweden from 1929 to 1926. But we can see we have the serial number. One of the rumors about this tank, it was like, this is a veteran tank, as you saw in the newspaper article. So the rumors were it was, it had bullet hole, it was damaged from World War I, it's really a war tank. But no, it is not. This tank was actually produced in the 23rd of June in 1920. So it was a newly produced tank. It was like a year old when we got it. So it had not been in the World War I. But of course, it's a World War I tank, but it's made after the war. The price tag for this tank was 37,000 Swedish crowns, which at the time is actually a lot of money. In the next video I will make, we will talk about the German tank and why we choose that over buying more of the French. There is two factors. One is about I will talk about this later in this video. One is about we were not so pleased with the Renault tank. It had some problems. And the other thing was actually money. Because remember, Sweden is not a very rich country back then. In the 1920s and 30s, we were not had so much money. And the price tag of 37,000 Swedish crowns for one tank, we felt it was a little bit much. So in the first inspection was in May 1921. Already in the autumn, we have the tank in Sweden, and we have it for the first maneuver in August, September of 1921. And that is the first time any tank has had a military maneuver with the other forces of the Swedish army. And as you can see in this small article, there is more articles you can find. And there was a rather big success, I would say. Everyone was amazed about this tank. You can imagine the people who had never seen a tank in their life, and the other forces like cavalry with the horses and everything. And then you have to do a military maneuver with some metal box rolling around in the countryside. So a few military maneuvers, I think it's two we have in 1921. And then in 1922, there is no more information about this tank. It's like one whole year is quiet. Probably they do tests because this tank goes through a lot of testing in 1921, probably in 1922 too, but we have no information about that. And probably this is also why, because a whole year with no information, and then suddenly in 1923, the tank pops up again. So it's very easy, even though this is only 100 years ago, it's very easy for us now to say like, oh yeah, but we bought the tank in 1923 after the German tanks, if we are missing the small piece of information from 1921. So in 1923, We have military maneuvers with the single one French tank, with the German tanks, the M21s. Uh, and after that, we start having a lot of problems with the Renault. We have problems with the engines, with the transmission, and really, probably we have used it very hard in testing and in Swedish conditions. Here, we have a lot of wet land. It's a lot of rivers and streams, and it's not a very good place to run around with early tanks. And really, after 1924, the tank gets phased out. They do some more tests with it, and in the end, it has a very sad ending. Really, in 1925 and 1926, they put it out to Marva, the artillery ranges, and they just shoot it up. They use it for test firing, to test fire the armor and try different weapons, and they shoot it to pieces. And after 1926, they took off the pieces of the tank in the field, and we don't know what happened. Probably it got scrapped or something. And that was the end of the Renault F1 in Sweden from 1921 to 1926. So why did we not choose the Renault F1 over the later M21? The later M21, I mean, it was a bigger tank, and in some ways it's not a very good tank either. But Renault F1 also had a lot of problems that we did not like in Sweden. One of the major problems with the Renault F1 was the weak engine. It has a very small engine, around like 50, 60 horsepower, to run a tank like at 4.5 tons. Another thing too was the tracks. How the tracks worked did not work in Sweden. They had a problem with that. It gets stuck. It could not get grips. It was too flat, I think, because it's pretty flat, huge links with doesn't have so much to really get traction in this mud soil we have here. And the third thing was, of course, the armor. It didn't have a very thick armor, and it was not a hardened armor either. So too small engine, bad armor, bad tracks, and the fourth thing would probably be the price tag. It was too expensive. We couldn't have the money. But imagine buying like 20 of one of these, and you need all the spare parts and all the knowledge about it and everything. And no, they said, no, thank you. We will look for another tank. And they already bought the parts for the M21, the German tank. If we're going to look a little bit deeper into the numbers of the Renault F1, the early Renault F1, we will buy another Renault F1 later on, but that will be another video. The early version is a two-man crew, of course, and you can see in this picture they're sitting very close together. They have like, but the driver in the front have huge doors in the front that can go out and in. The turret is 360 degrees. It's a one-man turret. The gunner and the commander is, of course, the same person. They have a small cannon, a 37mm Putte. I should also say the nickname of this tank was Putte. Putte could mean Patrik, the name Patrik, but it also means someone who is small. Something small is Putte in Swedish. And of course, a gun called Putte will be Putte in Swedish. The interesting thing with this gun, the 37mm gun from this Renault, was when we shot it to hell, we did not shoot the gun. We had taken off the gun, and the gun will be reused because that is really the first tank gun in Sweden. Of course, they will not shoot it up, so they put it in the German tanks in a test turret in one of the German tanks, the M21. The armor of this tank is somewhere between 8mm and 22mm. I see a little bit different numbers there, but around there. So we talk about 2 centimeters or 2.2 centimeters in the front and 8mm like underneath or on top of it. It is a weak engine, 50-60 horsepower. Top speed somewhere between 7 to 9 kilometers per hour. So we talk about brisk walking, That is the speed. Because the idea was also it should not move faster than infantry. It's an infantry support tank. The small gun, the Putte, is of course a very low velocity gun. It has high explosive rounds, and the point is to get close to machine gun nests and blow them up, or small bunkers, stuff like that, to help the infantry. So it's a low velocity, short range tank gun. The French Renault WW1, in the end, became actually a pretty successful tank. There was a lot of countries who bought it from France. France made different versions of it and exported it, and we buy one later on. But the first tank we buy in Sweden never became an official tank. We never had a army designation for this tank. It only became the Putte Army F1. It had a short 5 years in Sweden, a lot of testing. We learned a lot from this tank, you should say. But in the end, we blew it up as a target practice. So now in the end of this video, this was a lot of fun. I hope I don't talk too fast and you get a lot of my information. I want to thank the Swedish Tank Museum, Arsenalen, in Strängnäs. They are one of the best tank museums in the world. They have so many tanks, so much knowledge, and they have so much unique tanks. And that's why I do a lot of videos now from that museum. I hope you like this video. Give me likes, share it, give me comments. I love comments. And I see you in the next video. That will be, of course, about the tank I talked too much in this video about. The German LK2, called M21 in Sweden. So, thank you for watching and have a very nice day. Goodbye.